You might have noticed that we're an hour earlier than I was doing, so I'm kind of playing around with my times now that it's just me. Um, I wanna be able to pick times to do my shows that are gonna be best for myself and my son. Um, but I also know, I never like, competing. Not that it's a competition, because I know my shows, especially this one, is not gonna be a competition for anybody. I'm actually surprised as many people are watching this show as are, because I know this is a very niche topic. Um, so, I know Defected is a very big show, and it's an awesome show, and people like watching that, and so I was kind of like, well, that time works for me. And I know I'm not going to be taking people away from them. So that was just the kind of the time that seemed to work. But then I did actually get some messages from people saying, I wish you weren't going at the same time as that. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, I can play around with the times. I think um, when y'all switch your time zones and we don't, this might end up being better for me anyway. And when we do the book club every fourth week, it's still going to conflict, but whatever. I'm just kind of playing around with it and seeing um, kind of how it goes. I am obviously right now just doing these two shows, and I wasn't trying to. This show is more of just a creative outlet for me. I'm just trying to get myself going. And so I feel like these topics are fun. I like to talk about them. And so I just wanted to give myself, this space to kind of leave the Buddhism out of the regular Kate Awakening live show. But I do have some other things that I am going to be rolling out, hopefully. By the way, it is raining cats and dogs. And speaking of dogs, Archie wants to come in and he's all wet and he's got wet bangs. It's monsoon season, which is my favorite season. I love monsoon season. So anyway, it's like it'll be sunny all day and then all of a sudden it's just like boom, all this weather comes in. It's fun. So, yeah, so possibly some other things in the works, hopefully. But for right now, I'm doing this show, like I said, for fun. But I also think that I find them fun. I don't necessarily have to believe in something in order to listen to it. In fact, when I say studied, I mean, I've read like a book or two on most of the major religions just because I'm interested. And that doesn't mean that I sit there going, oh, yes, I believe this now. In fact, some of them I chuckled my way through. I mean, let's face it, I read a book on Darwinism, and I would never say this to somebody's face, or if somebody was trying to teach me about it, I would never be rude about it. But to me, it doesn't resonate. Didn't stop me from trying to learn about it. And some of these things are just historically interesting. So I do think that it's important for us what to learn about all kinds of things and then land back on the truth that we maybe already had, or maybe learn some more new things that we didn't already know. And I know that some people like to crap on Buddhism. Some people like to crap on whatever it is that they don't believe, and to each their own. Um, even if you want to crap on it, you got to learn about it first. I think I don't think you can crap on it until you really actually learn about it. And some people that I hear crapping on it, it drives me nuts, because I'm like, I know you don't know anything about what this is, like fundamental basics. There are thousands of types of Buddhism. You can't lump them all under one umbrella, just like you can't lump all types of Christianity under one umbrella, or any type of religion whatsoever. So uh, that's why I just feel like these are whatever. It's just a little piece of information, or some little pieces of information for you to do what you want with, believe it not. I don't even know, when I talk about this stuff, it's not even necessarily that I'm like, hello guys, this is what I believe. I am just learning myself. And so there are some things that I do believe because I've had my own experiences. Uh-oh, Archie's got the zoomies. Just don't knock over my stuff, please. Um, so I don't know, like when I read about some of the things, it's not that I am, trying to be a spokesperson on behalf of any belief or any philosophy or anything like that. I'm just kind of taking what I learned to you guys. And to me, breaking this down into little, bite-sized nuggets in doing several shows about Buddhism is, I don't know, it's just fun. And it's just what I wanted to do. Becky Lou Who says, I learned about Mormonism and Scientology from South Park. It's very educational. So did I. I actually, one of my best friends, though, is a Mormon, and she talks to me about it. And I get really excited hearing her talk about it because, number one, she's so passionate about it. And to hear her talk about it, um, I get emotional because she gets emotional. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. There just is. And a lot of times when I'm listening to her talk, she's speaking about, obviously, these are her specific beliefs and how she learned them, but they so very much align with so many of the things that I believe. And so I'm like, well, that's really cool. I'm always excited to hear what people believe. And that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't mean I walk away saying, okay, this is now my brand of belief. So Scientology, I tried learning from Dianetics. I have Dianetics. I have attempted to read, oh, did you see that lightning? I have attempted to read that stinking book. Um, it was right when I said Dianetics too, wasn't it? The lightning struck. Oh boy. Um, I feel like it's intentionally hard to read. It is really, it's thick. It's not just thick in the size of the book. It's like it's thick to comprehend, let's just say. But shoot, I want to know about it. And I mean, it's got to do with aliens and memories stored in our DNA. And that's all very interesting to me. So shit, maybe we'll even cover it on this. Cause like I said, I feel like it's important for us to know what it is that people believe. Um, so yeah, we're gonna start with Buddhism, and today we're going to be talking about the life of Shakyamuni, who is considered the original Buddha, even though it's a misnomer in even Buddhism itself, that Buddhas have always existed throughout eternity, and really the fundamental uh, teaching of Shakyamuni ultimately was that every person is already a Buddha. They just don't know it. And so that's what a Buddha actually means. It means an awakened one. So it doesn't mean something that has shifted forms. It means somebody that has awakened to the nature of what they already are. And he we'll talk about his life, which I think is also, fascinating just historically. He lived, years, hundreds of years before Jesus, and kind of what was going on at the time in the world when he lived, and the religions that existed at the time. And yeah, oh, before we get too far, I just want to mention CBD and More, which is the sponsor of this show. It is hands down the best CBD in the world. There's no comparison there, because it's not just CBD. It is made with moringa oil. It is infused with light and vibration. They do all this stuff to it. I have had so many incredible messages from people talking about how they've ordered it. First of all, their experience calling Joel, and he is just a wealth of knowledge and a super nice guy, and always very down to help. He will spend as much time on the phone with him with you as possible, or as you need. And that's why I'm not like putting his number up, because I want to keep like really the important calls to go to him. The website is really easy to use. It's CBDandmore, MORE.com/Kate, and if you use coupon code Kate15, you will get 15% off of your purchase. I take the 2500 milligram. This one's actually empty. I have another one next to my bed though. I guzzle these. I'm like an old wino with my little bottles and my purse and stuff. I'm just like, oh yeah, hang on just one second. Some ladies bring their own salad dressing everywhere, or bottles of vodka. I bring my own CBD, but it's amazing for a million different reasons. Everything that you've heard about CBD, being good for anxiety, depression, even pain management, this and more, but also and more. This also has the moringa oil, which is really great for healing all kinds of things. And I would suggest that if you have questions about ailments that are more severe than the ones that I've listed, that you give Joel a call and talk to him about it, or just give this stuff a try. You won't regret it. You will sleep better. You will have less inflammation. You will have less chronic pain. I take it instead of the antidepressants that I was taking for years. So highly, highly recommend. Hey, Mike. So first of all, I wanted to clear this up because I think this is funny. When you guys think of Buddha, like if you get a picture of Buddha in your mind, who do you picture? You picture this guy, right? This is a slide I made for a presentation I did like 6 years ago. But that's what you picture, right? That's everybody thinks that's the Buddha. That is not the Buddha. That's actually his name is Budai, I think, and he's from Chinese folklore, and he is kind of the deity of, I think, abundance and wealth and things like that. That's why you'll see him in restaurants or places of business. He's usually holding like a bao bun, and he's always smiling and super duper happy and really, really fat. That's what I think a lot of people think is the Buddha. But actually, the Buddha that most people talk about is this guy, Shakyamuni Siddhartha. He was not fat. He was actually very thin. And his real name was Siddhartha Gautama, or yeah, Gautama. And he's called Shakyamuni, the Shakyamuni Buddha, but Siddhartha was his name. And he was born in 563 BCE in Lumbini, which is actually, people think that he was born in India. It was actually modern day, what is now Nepal, is where he was born. And he was born into a royal family. His father was the king. I think his name was Sedona, or I'm always bad. Sedona or something like that. They're always like 11 syllables, and you guys know that words escape me. And his mother was Queen Maya, who was also pretty famous. And the father was the king of the Shakya clan, which is why he's called the Shakyamuni Buddha, Shakya. And so he was a prince, and he lived a very princely life. He was very guarded. The Siddhartha Chris Christie, I like it. Hi, Duffy. Yes, he did die from bad food, but you're getting ahead of us. Spoiler alert, he died, guys. He's no longer alive. So his name actually meant one who achieves his goal, and which is interesting because he achieved enlightenment, and that's a pretty massive goal. But he had several predictions or prophecies before he was born by these certain Sikhs and seers, and there were a couple different prophecies that he would either go on to become a great ruler and king, or that he would go on to become a religious leader. So or spiritual leader, and that's obviously what he became. And the kind of the crux of the story of his life was this very sheltered world that he lived in. He lived in the palace, and his parents did not want him seeing anybody that was ill or elderly. So he was surrounded by beautiful young people his whole life. He didn't even know that illness and death existed, or aging. And he had a wife. In fact, I think there are some stories that say that he had 4 wives, which, it was the time, guys. He had a wife for each season and a home for each season. And that's literal. You had a home for the rainy season, and you had a home for the summer. And he did have one child whose name was, I'm not even going to, I think I do have it in my notes. But I'll get there in a minute. But he didn't know anything of suffering because he lived such a cushy life. And when he was 29 years old, he finally left the palace gates and he went out into like the surrounding village. And there he saw what they refer to as the four sights. It was a sick person, an elderly person, a dead body, and an ascetic, or somebody that, wandering ascetic, a person that practices uh, well, asceticism, kind of depriving the body, depriving the human body, the people that fast and whatever. And so the realization that was caused by seeing these things for the first time really had an impact on him. He was, you know, blown away, first of all, that people suffered like this, and it exposed him to the fact that that is a part of life. Aging and sickness and death were all a part of life, and that it also exposed him to the possibility of a spiritual path. The whole point of the ascetic practice was that there was this belief that you had the spirit, which was pure, or the soul, which was pure and connected to God, and then you had this human body, which was the source of suffering through, the pains of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and also through the pains of desire and needs and wants. It was like all of those things are the things that keep you back from attaining enlightenment, or so they thought. Those were the early kind of beliefs. So he decided at the age of 29 to uh, to leave the palace, and he renounced family life, he renounced his crown, and he wanted to go and try to find the meaning of life, but also try to find an end for suffering, to see if he could heal suffering. And um, he spent 6 years practicing extreme ascetics. So that means, he was starving himself to death. Some of these people would eh, try to make themselves stop breathing. It was basically like they were trying to kill off the human body without dying. Um, it was extreme escapism from being a human being and everything that goes along with being a human being. When we think of the monks today, we very much kind of associate them with going up into the mountains and leaving the secular life behind and not involving themselves in society. Some of them take a vow of silence. They don't even talk to other people. They only eat certain things, or they will only eat what's given to them. They will only wear certain things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the practices then were very, very extreme. And again, it was kind of this belief that, the harder you were on yourself and your body, the more you could kind of escape from it, and in that way achieve enlightenment. Well, after these 6 years, he did not attain enlightenment, and he kind of convinced himself that this was not the way. He also was an incredible student. He excelled very much at all of them. He didn't just like try something for a little bit and then say, this sucks, I'm out. He really excelled to the maximum, in some cases even uh, beating out his masters in his ability to, you know forge through. But he decided that this was not the way, and he started to believe in what he called the middle way, which was one of the things that he would preach. And the middle way was basically just realizing that neither extreme was correct, neither asceticism nor indulgence were the way to happiness. That we are human beings because we're supposed to be human beings, and because we're supposed to live life as human beings. And so it's not about trying to escape being a human being, either by um indulging in all of your desires and pleasures. That's not going to bring you true happiness. But also, basically punishing yourself and your body and starving yourself is also not going to bring you happiness or enlightenment. And really, that is what enlightenment was about. It wasn't so much about, seeking the knowledge so that you just knew it. It was really about trying to alleviate suffering from humanity. And trying to help lead people to happiness because everybody wants to be happy, and suffering is what keeps us from being happy. So after that 6 years, at 35, he went and sat under a Bodhi tree. So the story is that he was done doing all of these practices, and he had realized that he was killing himself. He realized that he was skinny and starving, and his skin was pale and gray, and he knew that he was very sick. And a young girl came up and offered him, I don't know what it was, some kind of food, porridge, I think, some cream of wheat. And he ate the food, and he took a bath in the river because he was disgusting. He was sick and skinny and crusty, just like Archie. And so he took a bath in the river, and then he decided to go and meditate under the Bodhi tree. The Bodhi tree is, symbolic now for the Buddha and enlightenment. My favorite vegan restaurant. I wasn't a vegan, but I used to eat at this vegan restaurant in California all the time called the Bodhi Tree. It was bomb. If you ever go to Huntington Beach and you go to Bodhi Tree, try the jackfruit salad. And what else did I get? The lettuce. They were like these egg roll things that come wrapped in lettuce. Oh my God, holy shit. They were so good. Everything at that restaurant was good. I hope it's still there, and I hope to go back there. I'm really hungry right now. So he ate the food and sat under the Bodhi tree, and he was determined to sit there until he attained enlightenment, which was 49 days he sat under the Bodhi tree. And after this deep meditation, he attained enlightenment. But this wasn't one of the interesting stories. Mara is supposedly some kind of demon, or I think the demon of desire. Mara came to him while he was meditating, and basically, what I find interesting about it is that Mara wasn't just trying to stop him. Mara was using sound logic and saying to him, you're so sick and you're so skinny, and you've been sitting here for 49 days, and you've already practiced all of these other things, and you know that they don't work, and here you are still kind of depriving yourself. Like, you should just get up, because if you sit here for any longer, you're going to die, and then you're no good to anybody. And I'm sure that almost got him. It would have gotten me. Shit, I want to quit right now. And but he didn't. And right after that was when he attained enlightenment, when he said, no, basically, screw you, I'm going to sit here. And the reason I find that story so interesting is that symbolically, throughout Buddhism, one of the stories that is told is that, we hear it's always darkest before the dawn, but it's always your worst challenges come up right before you basically turn the corner. We all feel like when we're struggling, or like we're climbing this mountain, or we have something that we have to get through, it seems like it's linear, and we look behind us and we think, oh man, that's as far as I've come. And sometimes we don't realize that victory is just around the corner, that it's not up this mountain that we can like look and see like, oh my God, this is going to be like another 18 years of my life. Sometimes victory comes the very next day. And so if you quit, one of the parables of I forgot, but it's like one of the parables was like trying to reach this city and having to cross a desert, and it takes 13 days to cross the desert, but you don't know how many days it takes. You're just going and going and going, and then quitting on the 12th day when you don't realize that literally the next day you would have made it to the city. So I feel like that's an important lesson in life, and one that I try to apply, when things are really hard, that when they get bad, I'm like, oh, it's a sign. It's going to be over soon, hopefully. It's actually also in The Alchemist that we're reading for the book club, that I hope you guys are. Hey, Keystone. Hey, Rose. I hope you guys are reading it too, because it's such an incredible book. But they actually talk about that in The Alchemist as well, that, they talk about what is beginner's luck, that when you start off on a quest, things seem pretty easy, and you're like, oh, the wind is behind you, and you're like, this is great, I can do this. But then you tend to get tested the most right before you have a victory. So I don't know. It's just one of those stories that I like to think about. So after he attained enlightenment, he was not sure whether or not he was going to attempt to teach it. Hey, Mikey. Duffy. Um, he was not sure if he was going to try to teach it because he kind of felt like it couldn't be explained and he didn't want to mess people up further. But he did ultimately obviously decide that he was going to teach it. And his first sermon, which I have the word written here, uh, you guys, literally, if you saw how many letters are in here, Dhamma Kaka Pavatanana Sutta, which was his first sermon, took place in Sarnath, where he taught the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. These are things that get discussed a lot in Buddhism. And this is kind of why I like talking about Buddhism is that these things to me are not religious, they are philosophical, and they're something that I believe we can all agree upon. The Four Noble Truths are number one, the truth of suffering. Life involves suffering and dissatisfaction. This includes not only the obvious suffering and of pain, illness, and death, but also more subtle forms of suffering such as anxiety, frustration, and unfulfilled desires. What do you have? Oh, okay, you can have that. Number two, the truth of the cause of suffering. Suffering is caused by desire, attachment, and ignorance. The root cause is often identified as craving, which leads to a cycle of rebirth and continued suffering. And also another cause of suffering is just having a human body. It's just a part of life. Number three, the truth of the end of suffering. It is possible to end suffering by eliminating desire and attachment. The state of liberation and freedom from suffering is called nirvana. We'll get into that a little bit. Or no, I guess I could just talk about that now really fast. Nirvana is a term that we've all heard before. We all, love the music. But it is kind of this idea of heaven is the way that, like the Buddhist form of heaven. And the form of Buddhism that I practice, the Daishonin, Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, basically says that idea of, achieving enlightenment and then like going somewhere else where you become a Buddha in Buddha land doesn't exist. That I still believe, just on my own beliefs, that this is not from this. I still believe that there is an ultimate destination. I think everything comes from God, so therefore everything goes back to God. That's really the only thing that makes sense to me. But along the way, I don't think there might be resting places between lives, but I don't think the goal is to like go out there and be a Buddha, sitting on a lotus flower pad and talking with other Buddhas and eating cotton candy and I don't know what. That sounds absolutely claustrophobic to me. I think the whole point of this cycle of life is to keep growing and advancing, and the state of Buddhahood is not separate from being a human being, that it's a state that you can reach as a human being where you're basically living at the optimum capacity, that you understand things to the point where life does not no longer become suffering. Even pains in the body and illness and all of that become sources of happiness if you are looking at things in the proper way. I mean, like, shoot, if you knew for a fact, I don't mean like in your heart or you really believe, I mean if you knew for a fact that every ounce of suffering that you go through is all the more beautiful that your life is going to be when you join back with God. You'd be like, Shit, yeah. Bring it on. Bring on getting fired. Bring on, my car catching on fire. Bring on whatever. You would just have a completely different perspective of it. If we really knew, we would probably have a very different perspective of a lot of things. But a lot of the suffering comes from not knowing or not being sure or being driven by the fear that if we do it wrong, then we are going to, burn in hell, or that nothing is going to be worth anything, or that there's no such thing as karma and anybody can just do whatever they want to us and they can get away with it. I mean, that's real suffering. So it's about changing your mind. When I do an episode, and it might be the next episode because I really am kind of itching to get to it, is the topic of the 10 worlds. That's when we'll kind of go deeper into that and discuss how um, everything is within the realm of humanity. Like those are shifts that we all 10 worlds are shifts that we can go in even throughout the course of a single day. But that the point is to raise our enlightenment, raise our understanding, and raise um our knowledge of the forces of the universe. Once upon a time, if people didn't understand fire, they probably suffered a whole lot more because of it. But once you understand how fire works and how it burns and how you can use it for good, it doesn't have to be a source of suffering, if that makes sense. And I don't remember if I already said number 4 is the truth of the path leading to the end of suffering. I don't think I did because the gosh, I don't even know. It's not Sanskrit. What language is it? These all have the language that it's typically called by, but I think this is interesting. The truth of the path leading to the end of suffering is Magga. And it's the way to end suffering is through the eightfold path, which we're going to talk about right now. A set of principles and practices designed to cultivate ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. So this is the point where, or the part where I was kind of talking about. These are just philosophical things, golden rules that I think that every religion pretty much has, and that I think that we can all agree with. And so. The Eightfold Path is often divided into 3 categories: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. So, wisdom, it has the first 2. Number 1, right understanding. Right understanding is the Four Noble Truths and the nature of reality, especially the concepts of impermanence, suffering, and non self. So, basically, the understanding that everything is always in a constant state of flux, nothing stays the same. So while that's scary for us, because as human beings, we always kind of long for the destination of happiness and comfort and security. And, with the realization of impermanence, you understand that that doesn't exist. But it's also suffering is also impermanent, and anything negative that we go through is also not going to last forever. And 2, under wisdom, is right intention. That's about cultivating the right attitudes and intentions, which include renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. So, do no harm. One of the things I like, was just talking about it today with somebody, is we were talking about how Buddhists are seen as kind of like pacifists, right? At least that was my perception of what a Buddhist was. And I think most people kind of have that because of the do no harm thing. And there are schools of belief where they will not, step on a bug. They won't eat meat, obviously. They won't, step on grass, whatever. And the Buddha, Shakyamuni, was asked by one of his students or disciples, I don't know if it was about, killing an animal for meat, or there was a story I know about. There was a bathtub, and sorry, my lipstick is driving me crazy. The disciple was supposed to go and clean the bathtub, but the bathtub was all full of bugs, I guess. And so he's like, "Well, what do I do? I can't kill the bugs, but I also was told to clean the bathtub." So he goes back to him and he says, "I'm supposed to clean the bathtub, but it's all full of bugs. What do I do?" And Shakyamuni said, "Clean the bathtub." So he goes back and he's like sweating even more. He's like, "Shit, I don't." I guess I could kill the bugs then, but I don't think I'm supposed to kill the bugs, and I really don't, I don't know what to do here." And then he goes back and he says, "What uh, am I really supposed to kill the bugs? Like, I thought we weren't supposed to kill." And what is the teaching here? Is it okay to kill or is it not okay to kill? And Siddhartha's answer was, "It is enough to kill the will to kill." So I think that's very interesting because it's not so much, I mean, everything is nuanced, right? There has to be justice in this world. Even Jesus flipped tables and, there are crack whips and whatever. There are all those stories. It is not about, there's always a right and a wrong. And sometimes the same answer for different things will, in one sense, it'll be right, in one sense, it'll be wrong. And I think the point is that we do our best. We do our best, and that you don't have the will to kill something. You're not out there like burning ants with a magnifying glass or like, slaughtering puppies on the weekend. Obviously, the will to kill is very different from, oops, I stepped on a bug or I swallowed a spider in my sleep and I didn't even realize it. Like, to not be hard on yourself when it comes to just real life things. If you need, I mean, some people need meat to sustain themselves. I know that there are probably vegans out there that will disagree with that, but I happen to believe that every body is different and that there are people that absolutely do need to eat meat, and there are people that do better when they don't eat meat. So whatever. So the second um, category of the Eightfold Path is ethical conduct. Number 3 is right speech, speaking truthfully, avoiding lying, gossip, harsh language, and idle chatter, using speech in a way that is kind, honest, and helpful. Slander is massive in Buddhism, probably because, well, just, I mean, not, we know why. It is incredibly harmful. It does massive amounts of damage. And I think it is probably the one that people make the most excuses for. I mean, everything else is kind of, we know better and we won't like be so bold if we're gonna like make any of these mistakes. But I feel like slander and gossip, harsh language, idle chatter, these are things that probably a lot of us are guilty of at one time or another. And so um, Buddhism takes it very seriously. Also, throughout history, anybody who has stood up for what was right was a victim of these things. And, and more, but it started there, right? So it's a very slippery slope. And, the damage that you do with those kinds of things is very real. Number 4, right action, acting ethically by avoiding harmful behaviors such as killing, stealing, and engaging in sexual misconduct, acting in ways that promote peace and harmony. Number 5, right livelihood, choosing a profession or means of living that does not cause harm to others and is ethically positive, avoiding occupations that involve killing, exploitation, deceit, or harming others. Mental discipline. This is now category 3. Right effort, which is making a persistent effort to develop and maintain wholesome states of mind while preventing and overcoming unwholesome states, cultivating positive mental habits. Number 7, right mindfulness, which is developing awareness and attentiveness to the present moment. This includes mindfulness of the body, feelings, mind, and mental phenomena, practicing meditation and mindfulness techniques. And number 8, right concentration, developing deep concentration and mental focus, typically through meditation practices, achieving a state of mental absorption that leads to profound peace and insight. So, we're going to get into later. When I say later, I don't mean today. I mean, I'm going to do an episode on the Lotus Sutra, which um, kind of gets away from it kind of gets away from meditation. One of the things that I think is important to understand is that times change, and so the teachings change. And one of the things that the Buddha was very good at was understanding his audience, so to speak, and knowing what they were ready to accept and what they weren't. If you go up and you tell the truth, I mean, we are all learning this lesson through trying to red pill people, right? Many of us, Not me, of course, but many of us probably tried a lot of bad ways or ways that were not so efficient at first. And then having to, know your audience, understand where they're coming from, knowing that you can't just walk up to somebody who absolutely, hates a particular um politician and start talking about how wonderful they are. That probably isn't going to work for that person. So learning how to work conversations and have dialogues with people that's actually going to open their minds and that they are ready for. And so Shakyamuni's teachings changed throughout the course of his life, and at the end basically he let everyone know with the Lotus Sutra that that he had done that some of the things that he had taught basically were just expedient means to get people to understand or prepare them to be ready to understand what the ultimate essential teachings were. There were the theoretical teachings, which were the early teachings, and there are still people in the world who are practicing these theoretical teachings, and they might even be getting you know results from it, if it serves them, if it works for them in their life, and if it makes them happy and live better, etc., then it's wonderful. um and that maybe there are these different paths. He does talk about the different vehicles, and that ultimately it's all the same vehicle, but basically people are going to gravitate towards what they gravitate to, and that, you know whatever. But at the beginning, if he would have said, started with the Lotus Sutra, nobody would have understood what he was talking about, and they wouldn't have been prepared for it, and they would have just looked at him, cross-eyed. He had to prepare people with the ideas of detachments and things like that. So he did eventually establish a community of monks and nuns known as the Sangha to continue spreading his teachings. And he spread his teachings for 45 years. He traveled across India, back and forth, walking over and over and over again, teaching people from all walks of life the teachings, and to diverse followers. He had kings and poor people and outcasts and merchants and all kinds of people that were following him. In fact, one of the most famous, one of his disciples was a king named King Bimbisara. I mean, you can look up King Bimbisara. I think we all kind of learned about him in middle school, didn't we? King Bimbisara was a friend of his, and when he went out to seek enlightenment, originally King Bimbisara basically said, "When I know you're going to achieve enlightenment, and when you do, I want you to come back here first, and I want you to teach it to me." And he did keep his promise. He went back and he told King Bimbisara about his enlightenment, and King Bimbisara became one of his disciples. Lots of interesting stories about the people kind of woven in. It's not just like, okay, man starves himself, man takes crusty shower, man achieves enlightenment, and then man teaches it. There's a lot of characters in this cast that when you read, oh, I wanted to get that book. Where is it? Oh yeah, hold on. Let me just go grab it to show you. One of the books I recommend. I stepped on one of Archie's squeaky toys. Okay. The Living Buddha. I don't have the cover for it anymore. I always take the covers off and then I lose them. And it's been loved. Living Buddha by Daisaku Ikeda. This is a really great book about the life of Shakyamuni. But he also had another important character in the story of his life is a character named Devadatta. And Devadatta was one of his disciples, one of Shakyamuni's disciples. And he was actually a very prominent one. He was very good. He was a very good student and he learned very well. And he climbed up the ranks of, whatever it was very quickly. And then he eventually got very arrogant and he wanted to be the one to shine. He was so skilled that he decided that he was better than Shakyamuni, and he wanted to start his own practice. And in his own practice, it was very I think he kind of thought that if he came across as stricter, that people would say, oh, well, that must be the ultimate teaching, because if this one is kind of, loosey goosey, then, surely his is a better practice. And so he was very stringent with, um, the nuns and the monks and everything that were, eh, following him. Certain things they couldn't do and certain things they had to stay away from. And did I say his name was Devadatta? I can't remember if I said that already. But anyway, then he actually ended up trying to kill Siddhartha multiple times in crazy ways. He loosed an elephant to stomp Siddhartha to death. He created a landslide when Siddhartha was traveling on the path below to crush him with rocks. And he did all of these things. And Siddhartha was, the story goes that he was able to employ mystical powers in order to survive these attacks. And which kind of leads me to the interesting, his death was very mortal, right? He was poisoned, and it wasn't intentionally. He was staying with them. They would travel around and they would stay in people's homes, and they would eat the things that people gave them. And there was a blacksmith that he was staying with named Kunda, and Kunda fed him, I don't know, tainted pork or the wrong mushrooms or something, and it made him very sick, and he got dysentery, and he ended up dying from it. Not right away. He still did kind of like travel for a little bit by foot, and then eventually died from it. But that was also another important teaching, because he was never harsh with Kunda, whatever his name was, um, about it. He wasn't angry with him. He wasn't harsh with him. He said, "Listen, this is part of life, and these things happen." and uh and it killed him. And I do think that this is one of the important parts of the belief of Buddhism, is that he never stopped being a human being. He attained enlightenment. That didn't mean he went flying around or, making the furniture in the house move. He was still very much a human being. So it wasn't about, you're not, I know some people do deify the Buddha, but we're really not supposed to. He's not a deity. He is an advanced us, right? The whole point is that we are supposed to have the power within us to also become the Buddha, um, and to live that way, and to free ourselves from suffering. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. He did have a wife, like I said. He might have had 4 of them, you know, Hakuna Matata. And he had a son, and the son and the main wife, I guess, the main wife became a nun and was practicing under him, and she eventually reached enlightenment as well. His son also became a priest or monk or whatever the heck they're called in that. And he was, known for his dedication. He was a really good student. And um, yeah, I think that was, but really, the essence of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha is really just compassion and wisdom, and living as a decent human being, but also that through these practices of being a very good human being and gaining the wisdom and gaining the faith through that, and seeing the effects of the causes that we make, and learning through each step, whether we win or we lose, we learn and we take those lessons, that through that we can actually advance ourselves um and not suffer. And so the second part, I think I said I was gonna do something next week. I don't remember what it was. Oh, the 10 worlds. No, that's gonna wait, because next time I wanna talk about now Nichiren Daishonin. Nichiren Daishonin was a man from Japan that lived in the 13th century, and he is what we call the Buddha of the latter day of the law. So when things change, right, with the times, we don't live in a world where people are going to sit and meditate for days on end or renounce secular life. I mean, if everyone that was suffering renounced secular life, there would be nobody there would be no one pushing the cart. Everyone would be in the cart and there would be nobody pushing the cart. And so that would not be sustainable. And so in this world, there has to be another way. And so basically that's what Nichiren Daishonin taught, was that if you look at the Lotus Sutra, it specifically talks about the latter day and how there are different ways, and that it will be through um, different practices that people can attain enlightenment later on, and that it doesn't have to be this endless cycle of birth and death that people go through, because at some point it's going to work, the world is going to get a lot more evil, it's going to get a lot more difficult to practice, it's going to get a lot more difficult to believe and understand. I mean, think about the times in India, Nepal, in whatever I said it was, 563, I think, BC. um People had a lot less influence in their lives, and they were a lot more ready to accept the new spiritual thing, or whatever the teaching was that came along, or whatever it was that their parents taught. No, Archie. So they didn't have a whole lot of options, they didn't have a whole lot of um there weren't many different beliefs, and you just kind of believed what everyone else believed for the most part. These days it's a very different world that we live in, and there are a lot of things to consider. People have access to far more information, they have different experiences, they have different lives, and so there needs to be um if you believe, like I do, that religion exists for the sake of people and not the other way around, that religion is here to help us through this life and help us to not only be better people, but also to be happier people, because we have faith in something that's bigger than us. And that is really where happiness comes from. When our lives are this small and we're only focused on ourselves, that is a great source of misery. So I want to talk about Nichiren Daishonin and his life. He has crazy stuff in his life. His life is actually far more exciting in a lot of ways. Well, not that Shakyamuni's life isn't exciting, but it was so long ago. We don't have a whole lot of detail from Shakyamuni's life. We have his teachings that were obviously passed down, and those are endlessly fascinating. But we're only going to focus on the Lotus Sutra because, like I said, he even said himself, kind of forget these other ones, and this is the essential teaching. This is all the theoretics, this is the theoretical teaching, this is the essential teaching. And that was what Nichiren Daishonin talked about. Anyway, did I get to it all? I feel like I did. Questions, comments? I completely missed the chat. Sorry, you guys. I hope that was interesting. Oh, there are pictures in this book too. Pictures of the supposed Bodhi tree that he, or I guess it's not the Bodhi tree, but it's like a sapling from the Bodhi tree. And I don't know, guy with goats, some mountains. It's an old book. This is probably, I think this was my mother's book, probably in the 90s. So I don't know when this was printed, 1989, but it's from 1976. This is its fourth printing in 1989. Anyway, that's a great book about the life of Shakyamuni if you are interested. But yeah, next time, I think we'll stick with this time slot. If this works for everybody, we'll do the 5 Pacific, whatever that is, 8 Eastern. And I am trying to channel peace, Keystone. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm making it up as I go. Don't forget to read The Alchemist if you're going to join the book club. You don't have to, but this one's super easy. And I think, so I know that we're going to do after this month, after The Alchemist, we're going to do the Celestine Prophecy. But I also just started reading Trump's, what is it? Never Give Up, that somebody sent me as a gift. And I just opened it today. So I have not emailed you back yet to thank you. But if you're listening to this right now or listening to it later, thank you so much for that book. I'm so excited about it and so excited to read it. So I started reading it today and it's awesome. So I'm almost thinking maybe we do that for the 3rd month. I don't know. What do you think? You guys let me know. Okay, thanks, Becky Lou. I'll keep it with this one. Thank you, Rose. You're so sweet. Very, very, very sweet. Very super grateful for you guys. And again, I am just glad you guys will show up and listen to my ramblings. This is very big of you. And but I have some good stuff. Like I said, I think I've got some stuff that you guys are going to be excited about coming up. So stay tuned with that. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for the Kate Awakening live. And give me just a second while I pop out of YouTube. Bye, YouTube.